Hey guys, my name is Colson Rosa, and welcome back to Seraphim Stories. So today, I'm continuing my series on the Narnia books by C.S. Lewis, and just talking about what authors can learn from these novels in order to help improve their own skills and ability in the craft of creative writing. So today we're going to be talking about The Horse and His Boy. And this is a very interesting novel because I've heard a lot of mixed opinions about it from Lewis fans. Some say this is one of their favorites. Like, I know my older sister, this is probably her favorite book in the series. And I know plenty of other people that think this one's very strange, very different from the rest of the novels, and they weren't really a big fan of it compared to many books in the Narnia series. And I think there's a specific reason for that. I think it's because this story is much different than a lot of the other books which Lewis chose to write and how he chose to write them. Now, personally, I really love this book. I have come to recognize some of the ways that it does stray from the more conventional Narnia storytelling type, but I've come to appreciate it for that, for Lewis taking a much different approach to this book than he does with most of his novels in this series. I will mention before I begin that there is a minor spoiler warning. Now, I'm not going to go into too many specifics about everything that happens, but I will be mentioning some of the things that happen in the novel. So if you haven't read it, I absolutely recommend it. So let's jump right into it. One of the first things I want to talk about is character focus, and how this story is really unique because it focuses less on the plot, and even a little bit less on the world of Narnia, though it's still definitely present, and focuses so much more on the reader's relationship with the characters. And with this focus on the characters, they become beloved by so many readers. You only have one book that focuses predominantly on Aravis, Bree, Hwin, and Shasta. But just because there was only one book with them doesn't mean they can't be richly developed in this book. And I think Lewis came to realize, because he came back and wrote this book later on, after he had written many in the series. I believe he wrote The Horse and His Boy either after The Voyage of the Dawn Treader or after The Silver Chair. And he came back and then added this story into the narrative, kind of like how he went back and added The Magician's Nephew as a prequel tale in this set of books. So these characters that you find in Horse and His Boy are really focused on. And Lewis doesn't want them to just slip through the cracks in the greater narrative of the Narnia storyline. He wants them to be beloved characters, even if that means at times making the story a little bit simpler in order to focus on them. We learn about what they like, what they dislike, their pasts, their emotions, and their desires. I think this is especially true with Shasta and Aravis. And at the same point in time, even the horses are characterized to be very likable, very interesting, flawed at the same time, and certainly personified to act a lot more like people would, so that we can relate to even them more. So Lewis is very careful, specifically with these four main characters. Now, there are plenty of other characters who will appear from time to time, but he spends a lot of the story just with these four, and up until the latter portion of the book, the main focus is just on their escape. And the love that Lewis shows for these characters is then paid off by making them memorable, even though they're not in as many pages or chapters of the grand Narnia narrative as other characters like the Pevensies. So the next thing I want to talk about is the individual story that The Horse and His Boy tells. Now, it's interesting because it's one of the few books in the Narnia series that I would say could just completely stand alone. For example, The Magician's Nephew, in my opinion, does not stand alone very well, because you need to have read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe in order to get a lot of the rich depth out of it. Furthermore, trying to read a book like Prince Caspian or The Voyage of the Dawn Treader is very difficult without having read the predecessor books, like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, in order to then establish it and ground it in what you already know. On the other hand, The Horse and His Boy could be read with a general understanding about the world of Narnia, and without having read many, if any, of the other books in the series. It explores a very different side of Narnia that's not often focused on by the other books. For example, the enemies, who are the Calormen, they are described in great detail in this book, even though they don't appear as often in the rest of the series. There are very subtle ties in The Horse and His Boy into the larger world, but a lot of the focus on the places that it explores, for example, Archenland as well, are not the major focuses of other books. So it's characters that are mostly unique to this story, a setting that is mostly unique to this story, and even the plot itself is so focused on their escape from the land of the Calormen into Archenland that it feels like it can hold up on its own. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is the escalating stakes of the book. As I previously mentioned, the start of this book has very low stakes with Shasta and Hwin's escape, and then their meeting with Bree and Aravis. And it's really interesting then that most of the Narnia books have very high stakes, threatening the entire world of Narnia and so many people's lives, being afraid of being killed. Shasta and Hwin don't even know if they're going to be killed if they get recaptured. They might just get sent back to their owners or their masters or their family. And being sent back, though, is scary enough for them that we relate to them and their desperate attempt to flee. But as the book then builds, there's a massive pressure for the stake of Archenland and Narnia that then emerges. But it's not until the very end of the book that you really feel those stakes, and they're then paid off in the ending. So it's really interesting then, after having read books like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, where the entire framework of Narnia itself is threatened by an endless winter and the White Witch who's seeking to control everything and keep the lives of so many just desperately trapped in this system. The Horse and His Boy takes a very different approach. As I mentioned, because it's so character focused, it then slowly builds tension, slowly builds problems. And for most of the book, you're just left with the problem of, will Shasta and Hwin escape? Will they be able to make it as far as they hope to and finally be free from the terrible land of the Calormen? Which is definitely stakes enough because you care so deeply about these characters and you're rooting for them to escape. But it's not till the end of the book that the stakes really escalate to the type of situation where hundreds of lives could be lost. The next thing I want to mention ties also into how important Shasta, Aravis, Bree, and Hwin are, is the personal tension that they feel. This is how Lewis is able to make those lower stakes still matter so much at the start of the book. He takes every moment, though they might be less grand in the sake of the world of Narnia, but he takes every moment and really shows you how much Shasta is struggling with them and how much his friends are struggling with those moments and how desperately they long for a better life. So you do get the personal stakes. Even if the stakes are lower in the sense of the entire world, you get much more personal emotions and feelings and problems and struggles that these four characters go through trying to work out their friendships, trying to work together as a unit, no matter how hard that can be. And that's how Lewis is then able to make this book feel like it has a resounding tension that is lasting. Because if he can get you to really relate to and put yourself in the own mindset and the shoes of Shasta or some of these others and wonder what you would do if you were trying to escape, then he can get it to feel so much more relatable that they struggle so deeply in their escape. And then by the time the book is at the end, you come to recognize not only was their escape important for them, which would have been excellent enough if it was just important for them. There are many stories that focus just on a few characters and lower stakes in the grand sense of the setting and just more on their personal ambitions. But you get to see how it then ties into their escape, helping Archenland survive this terrible threat coming from the Kellerman. And this brings me directly into my last point, which is that The Horse and His Boy, as more of a standalone story like I talked about, almost a distinct and separate story that only subtly ties into the larger narrative of the Narnia books, is able to then have a very satisfying ending. Lewis can wrap it up nicely with justice served and everything neatly tied up with, you see Aslan's protection, the role that he gets to play in helping all of these characters. He's not forgotten in the story at all. In fact, at the end of the book, you can then look back and see, oh wow, that's where Aslan was working. That's where Aslan was moving, even in ways we never expected when we were reading the start of the book. And that's a very profound message about the role he's able to play in protecting the lives of Archenland and Narnia, but especially the lives of these four that are so important. And even in the lives of some of the Pevensey siblings who are playing a minor role in this story and more subtly tied into it. And it's just so satisfying to get to see their escape not only be successful, but it's so satisfying to see Shasta's true nature revealed and him and Aravis getting the place together that all the readers deep down were secretly hoping they would get to. A place of safety and a place of being together. And that just wraps a bow so nicely on this book that if you were just reading this book, you would get a full and complete arc for all of these characters and a full and complete ending for them without having to suffer through any more tension on their part. There's of course greater tension we're going to see as we continue in the Narnia series for the rest of the world. But at least for them, at least for these characters in this novel, they get their happily ever after ending for the most part, and they get to celebrate that victory and that joy that they have for their story arcs being completed. There's no cliffhangers or waiting for a second book to figure out what happens to these characters. You get to, at the very end of The Horse and His Boy, sit back and feel like so much was accomplished for them when you put down the pages of this book. So guys, thank you so much for listening to this video. I hope it really gives you some more ideas of a different type of story that can be told. Maybe your types of books that you're writing fall a little bit less in line with the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe style that we'll then see ties directly into Prince Caspian's style, as they are very similar in many regards. But maybe you're writing much more of a character piece, or much more of an individual story that might not have a series tied to it. Or maybe a story that starts out slower and only builds in the end. And having that personal tension matters when you're trying to write a story like that. So no matter what type of story you're trying to write, or if you're not trying to write one yet, you're just excited about the world of fiction and creative writing and being able to get so much more out of the books and the movies and the literature that you digest, please consider liking this video and subscribing to this channel. Maybe even recommending to some of your friends that they check this channel out so that they can grow in their writing or learn more about the world of novels and fiction and literature. So thank you guys so much. Hope you have a great day. God bless.